I wish there were more people. I knew that more people around me were struggling with these same things because I didn't.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Conversations with Intent. I'm joined by my colleague, Lindsay Halliday, who's a clinical case manager at Intent Clinical. She holds a Master's of Science degree in clinical psychology. But most importantly, she's a mom to 3 children, a set of twins and another child. And she's going to share her own journey of becoming a mother, which involved infertility and hard choices. We're really excited to have you here. Thank you for being willing to get vulnerable and share your story. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Arden. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited that you're willing to talk about an issue that I think for so many women is so personal that they just don't even want to touch it. And that's for women. I don't even want to go to how it is for men. And obviously these are big stereotypes, but I think it can be an issue that really puts people in a vulnerable spot. So let's just open up the conversation. And if you don't mind, share with the viewers your story of having children and what that process was like for you.
Sure. I mean, I think those stereotypes are real too. I mean, I definitely experienced that. And I think that's why I wanted to challenge myself to talk about it, because it shouldn't be that way. I always knew I wanted to have kids. My husband and I started trying to have kids pretty soon after, actually right before we got married. Around the same time I was getting engaged and sort of starting this new chapter of my life. My mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and I really felt like an urgency that I wanted her to be a part of their lives. I wanted them to be able to maybe remember her and get to a place that they were old enough that they would have memories with her. I wanted to have pictures with her, and I wanted her to have an experience of having grandchildren. There are no other grandchildren in my family. So I really felt, even though this was like early marriage, and there's people that have been married for years and years and have been trying for years and years, there was like an urgency, even though it was soon in my relationship. And so, we started trying pretty soon. But trying at that point was sort of getting off birth control and just living our lives and assuming it would all just work out, right? Everybody thinks you spend so many years trying not to get pregnant, and then suddenly you start trying to get pregnant and you think like it's just going to happen. And actually the first time I got pregnant, it did just happen. The day after we returned from our honeymoon, I got pregnant. And when we were on our honeymoon, it was like storybook, like, oh, how great, lovely. But about 12 weeks later, I had a miscarriage. And so then we got like really serious. I was like, okay, well, that was lost time. And now I want to get serious, and we're going to do all the things. We're going to do the prenatals, and we're going to track ovulation, and we're going to have sex on the days we're supposed to have sex, not just when we feel like it. And it really became a priority. And that's sort of when we just were doing all of like the right things, and it wasn't working, and I wasn't getting pregnant again. And so we started talking to my midwife about sort of what do we do next? Like, we've been trying this for about a year and nothing's happening.
Yeah. I have a question, because I know so many of my friends have experienced miscarriages, and have gone on to have wonderfully healthy children. But one of my questions is, is that something you were comfortable sharing? Did you get support for it? Was it something that you just sort of said, hey, this didn't work this time, we're going to move on? Or what was your attitude when that happened?
I was so excited when I got pregnant that I did the thing that you're not supposed to do. And I'm saying not because you should do whatever you want to do. But I shared my pregnancy with so many people before I was sort of like in the clear again, like a term that doesn't actually mean anything. But I shared it with a lot of people. I told people at work. I had gotten to about like 10 weeks and I was like, I'm good, I'm fine. And I actually think I felt sort of embarrassed when I had a miscarriage and I had told so many people, because people say like, oh, don't do that. Like if something doesn't work, you don't want people to know. But I think that was actually sort of like a blessing in disguise, because I didn't have to just go on acting like everything was fine. And I wish more people did that. And maybe that's just the way that I cope, but I was glad people knew. I was glad people didn't expect me to just show up the same way and put on a happy face. Like people expected me to be having a hard time, and I was. And that actually worked well for me. And I now think if I were in that situation again, I would probably tell all of the people that I would want to know that I had a miscarriage, that I would be, showing up differently with in life. I'd want them to know there's a reason for that. And there are a lot of people that see that pregnancy as, one of their children. I didn't really feel that connection. I mean, I was excited for the pregnancy, but I wasn't sort of envisioning the baby at that point. I very much felt like this was a cluster of cells that I lost. And so I hadn't really gotten there. So I, while I was mourning, like the time lost that we couldn't produce the baby to give to have in our life and to have that experience with my mom, I wasn't feeling like I had lost a child. So I feel like I coped pretty well with the friends that I had that knew and the support that was out there. But yeah, it felt really good that I had made that mistake of telling people before that 12 weeks.
I wonder if it'll not be considered a mistake going forward. I mean, I know, and maybe it's because there's so many women I know that are over, they're considered geriatric pregnancies. And that term, makes me so ill to my stomach.
I know. I feel like we're going to have a lot of this because so much of this is it's not really
it's geriatric after 35. I mean, should we get the, what is it? The AARP card out? I mean,
exactly.
To me, it was comical. And so I know so many women, and I think to your point that they didn't share. Then it happens, or it happens later when they have shared. And there's almost this shame and they won't talk about it. And it sort of sits with them for a period of time. And so, as you said, everybody has a different style of coping with loss. But for many people, I would assume if they could say, no, I'm not okay with this. This happened. We were really excited. Whether you connect to the actual baby or just the thought of being a mother, as I had children via surrogates. And so for me, I wasn't actually physically carrying the baby, which is a whole other experience. And we had 2 losses recently and then one historically. And people knew that we were going through this. So people keep asking when, what's going to happen? And I've been very open. And it is sad, but it does give you, there's some relief in being able to just be straightforward and honest and being able to say, yes, we're going to have to regroup. In our case, we have to consider what are our options going forward, all those kinds of things. And I find it to be a relief. Not everybody would feel that way, but I can't imagine that not talking about it, whether it's publicly or privately with a therapist or your partner, get you through it any easier.
Sure. Yeah. And just to have other people that then open up to you and say they've been through the same experience is so healing. And
Absolutely.
if you're not sharing it, you wouldn't have that. But yeah, I agree that there's people that are probably feel that they want to keep it very private. And that's just not me. It would have felt so unlike me to just suffer in silence.
Absolutely. Me too. And I think that the thing I hope is, and I don't know that this is why people keep it quiet, but that there's not shame around there's something wrong with me. Because I think historically, when I talked to my mom about her generations, I think there was more like, this is something you're supposed to do as a wife and you weren't able to do it. I've known I wasn't going to be able to have children the natural way because I had leukemia and went through a bone marrow transplant. So I've been very accepting of that for years. I have had other friends who have gone through cancer experiences and have been much more, they'll contact me privately and say, please don't share this. And I'm always amazed because I think you didn't ask to have this condition, whether it's a result of cancer or just a result of how your body functions. So I can't imagine experiencing shame with that. But again, everybody's a bit different. So we can go back to where you were in the story. Your midwife, you go to your midwife, you say, what should we do next? What were the next steps? How do you think about what medical professionals you choose? And where are you emotionally in this experience?
Yeah, I mean, I was still mourning it, but also was like, well, I'm somebody who wants to get stuff done. I'm like, well, I don't have time for this. I'm doing it at the same time, I'm sad, but also let's start on to the next thing. Again, this is the first time I'm navigating this. So this had never popped in my mind as something I would have to navigate. So, you know, I had never thought of fertility clinic. I just thought it was all going to be easy. So I just really was like, where can I get into the first appointment? I didn't have any understanding of like, there are better places and maybe, you know, not better places. I don't know. Thankfully, I'm in Boston, so there is a lot of great places around here. So I just went to the first place my midwife told me to go and got the first appointment and was like off to the races.
How did you think? So from there, what was the process and how did you deal? Were there, you know, and you don't need to detail. I recognize that the process could have taken a long time, but were there particular instances where you either had a strong emotion or that were decision pivotal points during the journey?
Yeah. Well, you know, like when you start all of this fertility journey, there's all of the testing that goes on and it's invasive and it's exhausting and you're getting results and, you know, you're waiting on those results because it could mean 2 different roads you have to go down. So, you know, we had some speed bumps along the way for sure. And my husband and I navigated those together. And actually one funny story, which I can laugh about it now, but actually at the time was extremely emotional and difficult. You know, one of the, you know, you're testing me to make sure my system is working well because they're trying to see like, is there something we can fix? And that's the reason that you can't have children. And then they do like sperm tests for sperm count for my husband. So he had that lovely experience of like, here's your cup, see you in 15 minutes. I did check with him that he's okay with me sharing this.
Of course.
Because it is very vulnerable and personal and not usually something you're doing in a sterile room with a bunch of people in the waiting room. So, you know, they're doing the test for sperm count to make sure that there's viable sperm. And the first time he did that test, we got results that were essentially saying like, if there has ever been a viable sperm here, it's a medical mystery. There is no way you're going to have biological children. And that was not even something we had considered. We just thought, well, we're going to do an IUI or we're going to do IVF. We're going to be able to have our own biological children, even if it's going to be a little bit of a hurdle. And they repeat that test when they get it to confirm those results. And it turns out that there was a misplaced decimal. And actually he was fine, and we can like chuckle about it now, but you can imagine like we had not even begun to process that. It was devastating. And the shame that women feel around like not being able to have a baby, like there's so much shame for men around like, I want to be able to have my own biological child too, in a lot of ways. And that was rough. And like, we have gotten to a place that we can laugh about it. So we were sort of chuckling as I was revisiting all this, because it's been a while now, with him, just like remembering what the experiences was like. And we had to remind each other, like, that was not funny when it happened. It was really, really hard. So that happened. And also, you know, there was just that anxiety of like getting those tests back. Not only is it invasive and difficult, but you're also just like waiting to hear what the worst, you know, and also if we actually are healthy enough to go to the next thing, like the anxiety of like, let's get started. At least that's how I felt. So
no, that's so much been, I mean, so many things I can say related. I'm so thrilled that the testing was off, and I can't even imagine you or your husband's reaction when you get that
wild
news. I remember being in a meeting where I was talking about various ways, and it's complicated, so I won't even bother getting into it. But I recognized in the meeting with this one physician who I trusted that I probably wasn't going to be able to have a child with my own genetics. And I remember stopping and coming out, and it was like my worldview changed a bit. And it took me a while, and it wasn't like conscious processing. It was literally like just seeing a therapist, talking about adoption. Like I had to go down the way my mind works with everything. I need to go down every rabbit hole and get myself to a place that I'm comfortable. But we use a lot of humor. And in another podcast, I'll share, we had some very funny stories along the journey of having our 2 daughters. And it's easy to laugh when you have 3 healthy children later. harder in the moment when you're not even sure that that's going to be a possibility. So I can completely appreciate what that is. Would you say that you and your husband coped similarly throughout the process? Did you have different ways of coping with the sort of progress and setbacks?
Sure. I mean, I think we really leaned on each other. I felt, because I think my mom was the one that was sick, I felt this like urgency so much more. And he was grounding me a lot and reminding me that this is not, it feels like everything, but we still have to live our life. I think that was sort of for both of us, like, we're going to fake it till where we make it. In this moment, like, it feels like my whole identity is getting pregnant. Like, everything is about that. But I think he was the person that kept us like, we need to still live our lives. Like, let's go for a hike. Let's go on vacation. Let's do the things to try to feel some semblance of normalcy. And remember, like, this is our first year of marriage. Like, we're also supposed to have this newlywed time that, and we're having to have sex on the schedule. And, it's like not sexy doing this. And I didn't envision this for our first year of marriage. And that's really hard. So he was really good at keeping us focused on, okay, this is a thing that we're focusing on, but there also is this whole other life that we're building that we need to continue to be engaged in. So we really leaned on each other that way. And that's probably not because of me. That's probably because of how he pushed us. And I really appreciate that. But yeah, I think we really just leaned on each other. I would say I probably leaned on friends a little bit more, but I didn't know a lot of people going through this. I was fairly young. I was just before geriatric, and I think it felt young, even if I was a couple years away from a geriatric pregnancy. But really, like, people everyone was getting married around that time. And I think there were going to be friends that would struggle with this, but they were taking their time a little bit more. So yeah, I just tried to sort of keep focused on also living our life. And I think we were similar in that way.
I guess two questions. One is, did you think about, I know you mentioned friends and leaning on your husband. And to be honest, just listening to you, it sounds like the balance actually was healthy, because I always feel like it's great to have somebody who's grounding and calming. My husband is that way to me. But you also need someone in these circumstances. I can understand you had a separate set of urgency, but you also, if you're going to go through any kind of IVF or third-party reproduction, which, using surrogates or anything like that, you do need someone pushing. It isn't like the clinics aren't going to call you for the appointments. It's usually someone saying, okay, this didn't work. Can I come back? Like, there needs to be some degree of follow-up. So the combination can work well. I guess my question would be, did you think about engaging any kind of therapist or professional resource, did you seek out any kind of self-help groups? And most importantly, what were the doctors like during this? Like, did you find them to be comforting and helpful? Did you find them to be fairly straightforward?
Yeah, I really used like online groups, and I wish that I really knew that there were other supports out there. I honestly had no idea. I was just looking at online forums and stuff like that because I didn't really have a lot of friends that had been through this. And for us, the time it took to actually, once we had gone through all of the testing and stuff like that we actually had success getting pregnant fairly quickly. So had that continued, I think we probably would have been at a point that, okay, we need some guidance here. But we got lucky on that front. So I do sort of wish that there was more information out there for me, because I didn't really know. I mean, my midwife was wonderful and helpful, and the doctors were great and straightforward, but there is a little bit of a feeling of, you're in this waiting room with 30 other women, right? And they've got their appointments they got to go to. So, it worked out, but wasn't always the experience I would have probably appreciated at the time, but it worked out for us and like got where we needed to go. So in retrospect, like that's what I wanted. I wasn't focused on like the emotional part at the time. I was like, look, if you could have the worst bedside manner, but like, if you're the guy that's going to get me pregnant, I don't care. Like I was just like, let's do this. If we had gone through it a lot longer, I think it really would have gotten to the point that like, okay, I need a little bit more like hand holding and a little bit more emotional support here,
How did this experience change your worldview in terms of, maybe a better question is, did this process change your worldview?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just is one of those things that shows you can't predict how life is going to go. You can have a plan. It doesn't matter in a lot of ways. The planning's great. It's helpful, but at a certain point you can't control everything. I would like to say that now I'm completely laid back and I just take things as they come and it all rolls off my shoulders. It's still a work in progress, but it's a good reminder that this is just how life is. And it's been about 10 years since we've gone through this journey. And I've had a lot of other lessons that back that up, that's this is how life is. So it would be good advice to get better at accepting that. I feel like to think I'm a little bit better, but not worlds better. That's for sure.
I think it's a very honest answer. I always say like any of these experiences can help you put in perspective what you can control and what you can't. And I still aim to control everything all the time. I wish I could say, I said I didn't, having cancer, going through any of this, going through challenges, never made me the Buddha. I didn't sort of sit back now and say, oh, this is one of those instances. I will try my darndest. And then sometimes in the back of my mind, I'll say, oh, this reminds me of that time when this happened. Is this something is really within my control? Were there things that people did throughout your journey that were helpful or not helpful or said? I know one of the things I've always questioned is if someone shares, for instance, they've had a miscarriage, what's the appropriate response? So I'm curious if you have any insight into that.
Sure. I mean, I know the thing that I heard a lot that was not helpful is like, when the time is right, it will happen. And that was something that just made me want to be physically violent. Like the time is right now. The time was right a year ago. Stop telling me that. Every day my mom is getting closer to the end of her life, which I mean, we all are, but that was very much more so when you have like a terminal illness. And that is not for me comforting at all. So that was something that made me rage. And I think for having a miscarriage, like it was just helpful for me to hear that other people had experienced it and not necessarily like their own feelings around it. Cause like I mentioned, like I have friends that experienced miscarriage who very much like that was one of their children. Like they, that was their baby that is passed. And that is a very different experience than how I think of my miscarriage. But even knowing that someone had gone through that, even if their view of it was very different than me, it just made me feel like there was a community. I think going through a miscarriage and hearing when people had experienced it, that was the first time that I'd really experienced like a community of women is a really powerful thing. And this is something as I've become a mother and experienced motherhood, that like we need women, like I need women and women friends. And this is the first time that I really felt that and really understood how important women were to me. Because that even though it was my husband, my husband was there with me, he did not understand that in the same way the women in my life did, especially women who had gone through it. And it's only gotten clearer as I've become more and more into my journey as being a woman and being a mother, how I'm learning more every day, how important those relationships are.
And why do you think it was so important that you had the connection to women?
I just think it's just so different than the experience of being a man in our society. And there's so many things that, as much as my husband wanted to support and understand, there's just so many things that he couldn't. And he would never, even if he tried as hard as he possibly could, he could never understand my experience as a woman the way a woman can.
What is one thing you wished you knew at the beginning of your fertility journey?
I think one thing I wished I knew at the beginning is that there's more people going through this sort of thing, that this is not a situation that just, a few people are dealing with. I wish there were more people. I knew that more people around me were struggling with these same things, because I didn't, and I think that would have made a big difference. And I think that's why I'm always been somewhat of an open book, but I'm very much an open book now. When I have friends that are just now starting this journey, whether it be with infertility or motherhood or whatever, I almost to the point that I have to be like, I have to remember that there's some stuff they have to figure out on their own, because I don't want to scare anyone. But it's not all roses. It's hard. It's really, really hard. And I dealt with postpartum depression, and there are just the transition into being a parent, how that changes marriage, and then raising the kids. And there's going to be, when my kids are teenagers, there's stuff I haven't even experienced yet, I think I want people to know that it's hard. It's also wonderful and beautiful and all of those things, of course, but it's not for the weak. It's tough work, all phases of it, and I wish I knew that, and I didn't. And yeah, I have to remind myself, tell people about the great stuff too. But for me, I'm someone who I want to know the worst case and then be surprised by the best. And I have to remember everyone is not like that. But yeah, that would have been helpful to me. And I think that's what I hope people get from me and feel comfortable when they get to that point, that, holy moly, you didn't tell me it was going to be like this. I want them to feel like they can, my friends can come to me for that.
Well, I think you point out a really important point, which is, when we watch movies about motherhood, or we think about it as a little girl, the visions of it are all magical. It's playing with your little daughters. It isn't. This week I have two girls, as you know, almost twins, 38 days apart. Both of them got sick. One had a fever, one was vomiting. And, the fourth time you take the baby out of bed at 2 a.m, you're not thinking, oh boy, I'm just so happy at this moment to be here with her. You feel sorry and you feel helpless, and you're overtired. And so I think you're raising a great point, which is, because even for me, being a mother later in life, when I've calmed down in some of my neuroses, I would say there are times where I'm like, is this supposed to be this way? I didn't really think it was going to be exactly like this. And maybe it's not setting bad expectations first. It's more just sharing the reality. So when it happens, it's not a surprise to someone, or someone doesn't think I'm a bad mother,
Absolutely.
Which is, I think, the worst version of that.
Right.
You mentioned,
if I don't love every moment of this, what's wrong with me?
Exactly.
And I wish people told me, there are going to be moments that you want to run away and you have this fantasy of going to have a month without your children. That's okay. You are a good mom still if you have that. And that's a very common experience. And there is a lot of time that you feel like, is something wrong with me? Is anyone around me feeling like this? And they are. We are. And if you're not, I am suspicious.
Who are you, Mary Poppins?
Exactly.
You mentioned postpartum depression. I know that's not the topic of this podcast necessarily, but I know it's something so many women struggle with. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with that? Were there resources you found helpful? How did you know you had it? Because I think it's just an important thread for women to hear about.
Yeah. I tell everyone that has a new baby, take care of yourself. Just so you know, I work in mental health. I did not realize I had postpartum depression. This is my job. I would have, in retrospect, I would have gone, if I was my friend, I would have shown up at their house and I would have seen it all over them. And I would have said, you need to talk to your midwife or your, if you have a mental health provider or whatever. I really felt like it was just like, this is how it is. It's exhausting. I'm overly tired. I never really felt I never got to the point of having any suicidal ideation or wanting to harm my baby. But I just felt sort of like a numbness of, if I woke up and this like baby wasn't here, I would just be able to go back to sleep, and that would probably be fine. I didn't really have a lot of mom friends. My husband traveled 4 days a week, most weeks at the time. It was very isolated. I didn't have family up here. It was a very hard transition. And I went to my 8-week appointment, and after you have a baby, it might be something that they have to do now, or at least in Massachusetts, they give you sort of a postpartum screening questionnaire, and they handed it to me, and I didn't even have to fill it out. Like, they just put it in my hand, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so dumb. Like, how did I not see this? And I walked in to see my midwife, and I said, I have postpartum depression. I didn't even realize. And at 8 weeks, my son, Bobby, had started to smile, and she put him on the table to, take his measurements or weigh him or whatever. And he smiled, and she said, oh my gosh, look at him. He's smiling. And I looked at him, and I thought, like, I couldn't even see it. I couldn't see the smile. I thought he was just like grimacing or something. And that's those moments of, people's babies come out and they have gas on day 2. And like, we know biologically they're not smiling, and they feel this surge of love in their heart for this like connection with the baby. I didn't see it. I had no connection. I just had this like blindness to that. And one thing I do tell people when they feel like there's might be something there is that you should know that you do not have to have you should get a therapist, but you don't have to have a therapist or a psychiatrist to get antidepressants. You already have a midwife or OBGYN. That person can prescribe you antidepressants. You should talk to them. You can call your general practitioner. Likely you're going to still be going to see your OBGYN or whatever for, postpartum visits, but that person can get you antidepressants. And eventually, if you're going to stay on them longer term, you're going to transition to another prescriber, but you don't need to figure that out. And when you're depressed, you can't figure that out.
I was just going to say, it's such an important point, because I know so many people who it's like, I'm depressed, and now you're asking me to go find a provider. Like, you're just adding to the long list.
And even when I work with people that are not, friends, even now, that don't have a prescriber in place, like, your general practitioner can prescribe you like those first things that you need, whether it's like anti-anxiety medicine. Yeah, we don't want you to be with someone who doesn't specialize this forever, but like when you're in crisis mode, you need meds, and your providers that you have can get those for you. And so I went on antidepressants, and it was life-changing. Like 3 weeks later, I looked at my baby and was like, oh my gosh, like I have missed out. This thing is cute. And look at him, like he's smiling, and I could finally connect with him, which I just had no connection to him. He was a little colicky too, and that was really challenging. And then when I was going to plan on getting pregnant having my twins that I had with my second pregnancy, my provider and I spoke about actually going on postpartum meds on antidepressants again. I had gone off them and going on them again, sort of as a preparation to delivering, and talked about sort of the ones I can be on, breastfeeding and stuff like that. So I actually went on antidepressants preparing to have postpartum depression again, because the rates of having it a second time if you had it once are very high, especially and with multiples. I went on them before I even delivered.
Wow. Thank you for sharing it. I really appreciate it. And I think you've raised some important points for people to consider, particularly around how you access it and noticing it early. I love that you did it preventatively, because I think so many people say, well, I don't want to go on it if I don't need to. I understand that perspective, but sometimes the downside of it far outweighs the upside of being able to enter, the second, child's, or actually duplicate, 2 children, and knowing that you're going into it in a place that's going to be more stable or more, more able. It's not even stable. It's more able to enjoy the children.
Yeah. And that being able to bond with your kid is so important. Being able to,
of course,
love your child, and to, you got to put the gas mask on you first to be there for your kid. And I think, again, about the expectations about being a woman, like we're expected to just be a martyr for our children. It's like, we have to take care of ourselves first. And that is okay. And that is something you should do, and makes you a better parent. Even if it's going to take a weekend by yourself and sitting in a hotel room, eating takeout and reading a romance novel. If that's what you need to do away from your kids so that you can show up as a better parent, like I normalize that. That is normal. That doesn't make you bad, and I think I see a shift towards that. I do think we're destigmatizing this a bit, and people are, being honest about this stuff. And I'm really hopeful that continues for other women.
Absolutely. That was my last question, and maybe that's the answer, but I'll ask it to you anyway. What gives you hope?
Yeah, it's definitely that we're changing the narrative around this, and that I do think more women are feeling comfortable talking about this and realizing that this doesn't really have anything to do with your worth as a person or a woman. It's a challenging thing, and you're valuable and important. And whether or not you have children, whether or not you can have children, whether or not you want to have children, that is all valid and great. And I think that we're getting to a point that we're saying it enough and people are starting to believe it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We appreciate your vulnerability. I know viewers of this will resonate with your story on one or another, multiple levels. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of Conversations with Intent. If you're so inclined, please rate us on your podcast platform of choice. We're on all of them: Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. If you have any ideas about a potential guest, topic, or any other feedback, please email conversations@intentclinical.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.